Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CMS Wire webinar. My name is Brenda, and I'm here to help answer any general or technical questions that you may have today. Now, before we get started, I would love to welcome you to today's webinar, Scaling Up, using search to accelerate your content personalization journey. Now, here is a quick breakdown of today's agenda. Now, these numbers are just rough, so please don't hold us to these. If at any point during today's webinar you have questions, please don't hesitate to submit those using that Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. You can also chat with your fellow attendees by clicking on that public chat that is also on the right side of your screen. And there is also a resource that has been made available to our audience members today, and you can find that again on the right side of the screen under the Docs tab. Now, here is a little bit about us here at CMS Wire. We were founded in 2003, and we cover the primary topics that you see here on this slide. You can read our great content and register for upcoming conferences and webinars like today's, all by visiting www.cmswire.com. Now, today, I would like to thank our sponsor, Velir, for making today's webinar possible. Velir is a full-service, data-driven digital agency. For over 20 years, Velir has helped clients foster lasting connections with their audiences by shaping meaningful ideas into memorable digital experiences with data-driven strategies. You can learn more about Velir by visiting velir.com, short and simple. All right, so it's time to introduce today's speakers. Today, I am joined by Jill Roberson, who is SVP of Marketing at Velir, and she is joined by Sean Broderick, who is Director of Product Marketing and GMT at Sitecore. Jill, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Really excited about this webinar. So as Brenda mentioned, we'll be talking about search and personalization, how those things can potentially work together. As we know, personalization is a hot topic, and search really plays a critical role in guiding a user experience. And so I know Brenda kind of gave us a brief introduction, but Jill Roberson, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Velir. So I oversee our digital marketing team, and we work with our clients to develop and implement strategies that ultimately connect their organizations with those potential and current customers through digital channels and personalization strategies that ultimately are really aimed at influencing kind of those desired behaviors, supporting objectives and KPIs across all digital channels. And in a past life, I had the pleasure of working with Sean, which is why I'm so excited to have him join the webinar today. So Sean, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Thanks so much, Jill. It's hasn't been today or yesterday since we worked together, but we're still in the same ecosystem, and we get a chance to catch up in person and virtually. It's always really fun to do that. Sean Broderick is my name, Director of Product Marketing here at Sitecore. Obviously, a very, very close partner of Velir. We're one of the leaders in the digital experience platform space, really providing amazing experiences for our customers in areas like CMS, search, personalization, and some of the topics we're going to talk to today. So really excited to get into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And so before we start, we threw together just a couple poll questions just to kind of feel things out within the audience. So the first question that we have for you that the team will be pushing live is, we're curious if you're executing any personalization or tailored search strategies today. If you are personalizing maybe on your website, if you're delivering any sort of tailored search results, would love to kind of see how those results start to roll in and see that. I'm trying to see the results on my end. So we have a few votes for people who are personalizing. Some folks are tailoring search results. We don't have any votes for anyone doing, we have one vote for people doing this together, and a few folks in terms of, this is why you're here. And so I think it's great, to know that we have, base understanding of folks that are personalizing to a certain extent, whether that's site content or through search, as we know it's a strong strategy to kind of meet customer needs. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and if we can close that poll, and I'll take us to our next guiding slide. And then more of a philosophical question, curious to get everyone's input on, which is search and tailoring search a replacement for personalization? And so we'll start to see those results come in. We'll give you a little readout of those. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, this is kind of what we're talking about. So we have a few votes for, yep, sure is. I also realized as we're going through this, I forgot to plug my computer in. So I'm going to multitask over here. Don't want to lose anybody while we're presenting. But I think fundamentally, right, that's why we're here, is to understand, you know, these are two strategies that, you know, in general, I think have really been thought of separately. But when we're talking about the end user experience, there's definitely an opportunity to bring these together. So we do have a few votes for no, but it has a lower barrier to entry, which I think is a really important note. One of the big challenges with personalization that I've experienced is just getting started, right? And with search, it's something, you know, that everyone's really implementing on their site. So it does, in my opinion, also present a lower barrier to entry. So glad to see that. So
and lots of folks as well, Jill, who are not sure, and that's why they're here to learn. So I think they're in the right place, right?
I love that. Yes. So glad that you guys are here with us. And so with that, we'll kind of get into the meat of the presentation. So thank you guys for interacting with those. And so, you know, before we go deep really into personalization and search specifically, I think it's important to kind of level set on, you know, why we chose this topic today. And I think it's important to recognize that really in today's digital landscape, successful organizations recognize, right, that we've moved beyond websites. Websites have evolved beyond kind of static pages of information and really into these dynamic and hyper-connected platforms, right? And they're really integral to a business strategy, customer engagement, and the overall digital ecosystem. And so as we think about this evolution of digital experience, it's really important to think about how you can leverage existing marketing technology or invest in certain tools to build a platform that enables you to achieve your goals and really engage your target audiences in a meaningful way. Again, why we're talking about kind of two different strategies to serve up information and content to audiences that, you know, more traditionally have been thought of separately. And so as more and more organizations compete and differentiate through digital platforms, it kind of goes without saying that experience matters. I know that this is a common trend. And there's a lot of stats around this. This has been growing over the last couple of years, but organizations ultimately who invest in customer experience or CX and successfully implement a customer experience strategy achieve higher satisfaction rates. You can achieve reduced churn rates and increase revenues. But I think when it comes to that and knowing that organizations are competing on customer experience, the question is, or the question that we're always thinking about, I think, is what does a good experience look like, right? So what does good look like today? You know, good experiences today are kind of move beyond, you know, what looks good, right? And these intuitive interfaces, but they involve modern platforms. They're leveraging advanced tools to deliver experiences that are really dynamic and reflective of real-time behavior. They're personalized and they're hyper relevant to users. You know, these experiences that are really exceptional are powered by scalable and flexible infrastructure that's really connected through other parts of the digital ecosystem. So we're breaking down silos. And ultimately, modern connected experiences deliver data and insights that help your organization to learn and optimize your platform and help you remain competitive. You know, there's a lot of talk around digital transformation. I'm a strong proponent that it's actually digital evolution, right? We need this data and insights to keep teaching us, right? Keep telling us where we need to evolve. And that's really what a good experience does today, is it's continuously teaching you about what's working, what your audiences need, and kind of guiding you through how to evolve that. And so, as I mentioned, you know, good, impactful digital experiences today are dynamic, they're personalized, they're highly relevant to users. They have to be, because consumers want personalization. There are a ton of statistics out there about the impact of personalization. So I just wanted to highlight a few here. First, I think it goes without saying that personalization specifically is good for business, with 80% of consumers saying they're more inclined to do business or to engage with an organization that personalizes their experience. In addition, personalization is appreciated by customers. So 69% of customers appreciate personalization as long as it's based on data that they've explicitly shared, right? So there is a certain nuance there. But as we saw in the poll, search appears to present a lower barrier to entry, and personalization is still a challenge for marketers, which hopefully we can lower that barrier to entry with some of our tips today. And so now, while personalization is a challenge for some, I do think it's important to remember that there's different levels to personalization, and approaching personalization in a crawl, walk, run fashion is really important to not just getting started, but figuring out kind of the best way for your organization to mature efforts and to really operationalize these types of tactics. Within each of these levels that you see here, and I know there's a lot of text, you can mature both personalization and search strategies in each of these levels and start to inject more and more data into your strategies to kind of progress through that. At a high level, your entry personalization is often behavior-based, right? You're tailoring the experience based on a user's past site or search actions, things that they've interacted with before. You progress to more of a data-driven strategy where you're building on that behavior-based personalization, and you're leveraging data maybe from a system like a CRM or a CDP that has more holistic customer data, more of that source of truth. And you're oftentimes at this phase merging or trying to merge some of those on-site and off-site behaviors. And then lastly, kind of this holy grail of personalization is predictive, right? This is ultimately using multiple different data sources. You have that customer 360 view to apply predictive models that really help to automate personalization to drive conversion and engagement. And so those are kind of the three levels of personalization at a high level, for lack of a better term. And so, Sean, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about search specifically and the role it plays kind of in developing and maturing personalization strategies.
Thanks so much, Jill. I think our listeners are going to hear a little bit more from you a little bit later on in the webcast as well. I think customers across many industries, they're increasingly demanding the types of intuitive search that comes from AI-driven content relevancy. And AI is a kind of key point in this, and Jill is going to get into it a little bit later on also. So no matter how user-friendly a website is, on-site search is really a critical component to ensuring site visitors are able to find what they're looking for from an organization, and they want to have a satisfactory visit, when they can accomplish what they set out to do. And yes, sometimes users want to browse your site, they want to have the information unfold organically. However, as we know, consumers can be impatient. We want to find out what they're looking for as soon as possible, with as few clicks, as detours as possible. So when we think about site search today, it's complex to implement. It's not really user-friendly. The results are not often all that relevant. And I think there's a lack of insights available to enterprises as well. And we think what needs to change, and personalization is a key weapon in that armory. And in my view, the importance of site search is going to grow and grow. Like, complex site structures do not make for great experiences. Fast search results, pointing them where they need to get to, is really where the magic is. So let's dive into some of the detail here. With the removal of third-party data, search becomes another first-party data source that feeds personalization. Such a crucial point in this whole topic, this whole learning area as well. And personalized site search is a web search tailored specifically to an individual's interest, by incorporating information about the individual beyond that specific query provided. And there's two general approaches to this in terms of personalizing search results, involving modifying the user's query and re-ranking the search results. But for me, there's a couple of key elements to delivering a great personalized search experience. The first one is connecting the right content at the right time. So really mastering the art of aligning your content with your visitors' needs. The second is assisting visitors with preview suggestions, so you can guide your visitors effortlessly with preview suggestions, making their journey through your content really smooth, really intuitive. The third is creating an unparalleled visitor experience. So build an environment that keeps visitors returning for more. You need to be able to deliver results based on intent, Understand and fulfill your visitors' intent through search results that go beyond those keywords. And the fifth one for me is providing instant content recommendations. Exploring the power of instant recommendations and understand how they can significantly enhance user engagement. Those are all kind of key parts, and those are the 5 I would call out here. So personalization and search, they're different, but yet they're the same. The end goal is to drive a phenomenal customer experience. Customers expect that content is matched, sorted, and promoted to mirror the specific needs of their search experience. And to do that, your approach has to be data-driven as well. And especially in a world where I outlined the removal of third-party data, search becomes another first-party data source that feeds that personalization. But how do you really tailor that experience and drive visitor engagement? It's really about curating AI-based rules to amplify specific content based on business goals or in response to customer feedback. Also, displaying results fast is key to improving overall experience, providing visitors with predictive type-ahead search, all backed by AI-assisted personalization out of the box. That's what's going to drive a great experience for your customers. When we think about how these tactics complement each other, there's 4 kind of key areas that I would want to talk about today. And they kind of straddle the line between site personalization and personalized search. The first of these is improved user engagement. From a personalization point of view, it's keeping users engaged with relevant content and content recommendations. And from a search perspective, it creates efficiencies in finding content users are explicitly looking for. The second is behavioral insights utilization, how we use insights from interactions to dynamically adapt page experiences. And from a search point of view, applying search insights to that search algorithm, making the results way more accurate. We know that's really, really important in all search capabilities. The goal here really for most enterprises is enhanced conversion rates, driving conversions by showing content that matches interest in personalization, and in search, presenting results that users are more likely to convert on. The final piece then is about user retention. And from a personalization point of view, creating engaging visits that provide value and drive return behavior. And then from a search point of view, ensuring users can find what they're looking for and receive real utility in this experience, not just getting onto the site and figuring out where they're going.
I think we lost Sean there. Well, I'll just keep on going then. So yeah, as Sean is mentioning, the personalization and search ultimately help to achieve some of the same goals around user engagement, user retention, things like that. It's also, oh, Sean, you're back.
Hey, Jill.
Okay. I was just going to pick up and keep going, but I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think I just dropped off with the doing more with less.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, my bad. I'm going to pick that one up again because I think it's important to really highlight how much more. We're trying to do more with less here, but can we really quantify that? And I think the point I was making there around site search users, they're up to 2 to 3 times more likely to convert than non-search users, according to Forrester. Conversion rates are as much as 50% higher for visitors that use site search over ones that don't. That's from eConsultancy. And when used, search performs really well. Visitors converted at 4.6% versus websites average of 2.7%. 1.8 times more effective. Really, really important research as well from eConsultancy. And the last stat I have here is specifically every word added to a search drives a 15% increase in conversion rates. So those autocomplete functionalities are going to really increase sales. And according to research by SpyFu, they increase sales by 24%. Really, really powerful numbers. So enterprises want more content. They want to be able to better manage it, driving better engagement and being data-driven. And they want all these elements, but they want to do it with less. They want to do it with smaller budgets. They want to do it with less resources, less time investment, and less focus. And this is where automation and AI comes into play. And this generation of search and personalization solutions drives this change for me. 2 final stats I want to leave you with here. The increase in revenue marketers see from personalization, up to 20% increase. And I'd be interested to see from people in the chat as well, if they're seeing these type of numbers in their deployments. I know we had some people who had referenced the fact that they're trying out and trialing these type of solutions. but also marketers see an average increase of 8.5% in the revenue that they drive from personalized search. So it's super important to really kind of nail this topic, see how these two things merge together, and see what kind of impact it can drive for your business. And with that, I'm going to hand you back to Jill to talk about some best practices, hopefully without any tech gremlins in between.
Thanks, Sean. And I think those are some really impressive stats. And, just knowing that, especially with search, you're putting a lot of the user experience or the customer experience in the hands of the customers, and being able to have things like autofill and deliver kind of personalized search results. You're able to really take someone on a guided journey. And so when we think about best practices and how personalization and search, there we go, complement each other to ultimately help marketers do more with less, as Sean spoke about. Even though we're leveraging kind of two different tools and potentially even different teams, it's important to define what the best practices are to bring these two approaches together and kind of get them working in unison. Ultimately, the key to success for making personalization and search and tailored search work together in harmony is to plan together, right? It seems straightforward, but I think when we as marketers or organizations are in this spot we're in now, which is we're trying to do more things, as Sean mentioned, we have less budget, less resources. The tendency that teams have is to just take something and run with it, right? Because we don't have the luxury of time. But when we're talking about personalization and search together, you have to plan together and really start to break down those silos and think about how it's one concerted effort. And so there's kind of 4 key areas here when planning these efforts together. I think these 4 areas can be applicable to a number of different digital marketing strategies, but we'll go into the nuances here for what it means for bringing personalization and search together. From an operational standpoint, you may need to form some sort of tiger team of sorts, right? So that you have the right resources to plan and implement these strategies working hand in hand. And those teams really should focus on, first of all, like any other strategy, knowing who your audience is and really specifically digging into the journey that your users are going on so that you're defining your why, right? Why are you personalizing? Why are you tailoring these different search results, right? And how is that helping within the end user's customer journey? You also then want to take that knowledge of who your audience is, define your strategies of how you'll tailor the experience, and validate that against the defined audience needs. Then, of course, there's the actual configuration and implementation of these tactics within the systems that you have in your stack, and then measuring, reporting, and learning from what you've implemented, and ultimately that influencing, how do you evolve your strategies moving forward. And as Sean mentioned, both search and personalization, right, are first party data tools, right? We are getting direct feedback by serving up tailored, relevant information, seeing how people react to it, what it's leading to. So it's certainly something that we don't want to overlook. And so to start your planning and knowing your audience, right, you want to identify who are your different audiences and how do their needs vary. When we're thinking about tailoring a site, what we're doing is matching people to different criteria. When we're serving up search results, whether leveraging AI or some manual tactics to boost certain content, right, we want to know what type of people need what kind of information, what makes these audiences unique, as that's ultimately going to impact the strategies you decide to move forward with. Next, you want to think about, where in the journey may people hit friction? Where do people maybe need more convincing? And asking yourself these questions specifically will identify where personalization will be most impactful, what content can be served up as search results to really help guide those people. You also want to define when in the journey people need assistance. That's going to help to identify what questions people might have and presents an opportunity to be more proactive in the user journey, right? We want to be able to preempt questions that people have. And when you have a clear understanding of someone's journey, we understand what they've consumed before, ideally what they're going to consume next, and we can get that in front of people more often, or not more often, sooner, I should say. And then you also want to think about the content that a user may not seek out first thing, but that has really good nuggets of information that can help answer users' questions, again, in the spirit of being proactive in their journey. This content specifically, whether served up through personalization or through search, really plays a critical role in both of these strategies. And so, of course, there's different ways, you can create certain personas and things like that to, define who your audience is. But when we're thinking about personalization and search, going through these kind of specific questions and focusing on the journey is really critical to knowing how we want to then define our strategies using personalization and search tactics. And so once you have an understanding of your audience and their journey from that perspective, then we go into the strategic planning of it for both of these efforts to solve for those potential friction points and to introduce that notion of being proactive. So if the first step in the process, right, is understanding the why are we personalizing? Why are we tailoring search? This next step is really the how. So you want to define the ways that you're going to trigger both personalization on a specific page or within the search experience, right? For site personalization, you want to consider using those behavioral triggers, maybe such as visit number, date of last visit, a particular campaign that they've engaged with, or even progressive content or calls to action that keep the experience fresh and really drive towards that next best action. For search, you want to think about how you want to deliver search results, right? Balancing kind of keyword matching and contextual rules with content weighting. As Sean mentioned, the stat around, for every word that's added to kind of that search, there's an increase in conversions, right? So what are the strategies that we're doing to do that, right? To drive the conversions through some of that autofill. You want to think about if you want to feature a promoted result or commonly searched terms, and think about how you surface that really impactful, but sometimes potentially overlooked content that we discussed earlier. And in all of these scenarios, I think it's important to note that you're not just defining tactics, but you're really continuously mapping the how to the why that we talked about. So we know why we're doing this for our audience. And our second step here is really defining the how. And I think it's important to note that, don't forget that when you're defining and validating your strategies, that in conjunction with that, you really need to be defining your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and success metrics as part of that process, right? For each scenario that we define, or each tactic that we're going to use, or each segment that we're going to tailor for that experience, what are we expecting to happen? What are we moving people towards? If we don't have a metric for that, then maybe that's something we put on the back burner. We want to be driving action, engagement, conversion, really thinking about what are you hoping a user will do when they're presented with this recommended for you type of content, again, whether that's on a page or within the search experience. And think about how you're trying to influence behavior to define your success metrics for these efforts. And we'll talk about how we see value from this in a little bit. Here we go. With our strategies defined, right, you kind of now want to go through that configuration and implementation process. This actually is kind of a few steps in one, and as it's also kind of your documentation phase where you're defining the requirements for implementation of how everything will be set up and what the user will ultimately receive in the experience when these tactics are live. In my opinion, I think setting everything up is kind of one of the easier steps in the process. Once you've defined your strategy and validated it against the knowledge of your audience, this point and click part of the process becomes that much easier, right? We want to put in the training and the legwork to help us get there. Since different tools have nuances when it comes to configuration, you'll want to make sure, of course, you're following implementation best practices based on what tools you're using. And one key step I think that it's important to call out explicitly is to, when you're configuring, ensure that you have a QA step in your process prior to pushing any of this live. When you're configuring your personalization and the logic, right, to tailor search results, you want to make sure that you have clear documentation or specifications for that configuration, so you can always refer back to this documentation or adjust as needed. It's important to have records of what's being served up to your audiences, so in the future when you go to make changes, changes, you're not kind of butting heads with those original strategies. Going through this process too helps to ensure that you have the content to support the different scenarios and that your search results are ready. They have handy and organized and clearly labeled and tagged information to serve up. Again, you want to make sure tagging and tracking is in place to measure performance. And it's important that you define an order of operations to implement. So much of getting started with or scaling personalization efforts is really about kind of building that operational model to support efforts over time. And so making sure that you have a clearly defined process for implementation, and, don't be afraid to make tweaks to it over time. But this is such an important step, getting into the nitty gritty of the execution of it, but making sure again that you're building up that operational muscle, because we don't want these things to be set it and forget it, right? We want to be continuously learning. We need to adjust strategies based on, changing consumer behaviors just in general, what we're seeing with our own digital experiences, and making sure that it's documented somewhere, right? So we know why and how we're doing what we're doing is really important to making sure you're building that muscle and able to scale it. And so one of the main gotchas, before I kind of go on to the fourth point, when it comes to tailoring experiences, especially as you configure more and more tactics, right, within search, within personalization, is what I call the dreaded black hole of personalization. It is possible to over personalize an experience. And one of the main reasons that I mentioned kind of this QA process of what you've implemented is because you need to make sure that you're not trapping people or users in a personalization loop. This can happen in a few ways, but most oftentimes by trying to be everything to everybody and with your different strategies, we can present too many personalization scenarios or overly configured search, where it's possible to send a user down a path where they first match a certain criteria and we serve up certain information, but then there's no way for them to back out of it, right? There's no way for them to reset, who they are, what they're interested in. Again, we know users' needs change over time. Again, this is why knowing the customer journey is so important. And so having that true understanding of who your audience segments are and their journey is so important. And really where things like, tagging your content and identifying kind of user patterns is so important, so that people can match these patterns to get relevant content, but also so that they can shift patterns as their needs change. And so when you're defining your strategies, make sure that you're accommodating for a good portion of kind of natural browsing behavior and natural searching behavior, because, personalization and search are used to enhance the experience. They're not there to change the whole thing completely. And so we already touched on this a bit as part of your strategy, where you want to define what success looks like. But, think about how you're shortening a path to purchase, right? What are we trying to learn? Are we trying to provide uplift to a specific conversion? When we're thinking about the why and the impact that we're going to have on the user experience, these are the types of questions that we want to think about to make sure that we are defining and have clearly defined KPIs. So whatever your KPIs are, whether it's uplift, conversion, impact, engagement, all learnings are good learnings. Making sure that as part of your operational process, you're defining when and how often you want to look at how your efforts are performing and adjust as needed. The best strategies for both personalization and search are reviewed and measured often, and they're adjusted based on learnings. So make sure when you're taking the time to review how things are going, that you're also setting aside time to make those tweaks to what's been implemented as needed. And I think, this is more common. People are more likely to review personalization frequently and let search kind of run off on its own. But I think it's so important to, we talk about planning together. It's also about reviewing together. So giving search kind of this TLC that's needed. There's so many great learnings that you can get from search, and you want to continuously optimize that experience too. Even though it's kind of a consistent piece of the experience, it is something that needs to adapt as well based on what you're seeing from different data points. And then my favorite slide in this whole thing, and I think SpongeBob says it best here, but when it comes to learnings, remember sharing is caring. Don't be selfish with your learnings. We might be breaking down silos between teams that are working on personalization and search, and we're going to be gathering learnings about what's working in the experience, where we might have content gaps and things like that. But if you and your team see how a certain audience group is really digging a certain type of content, a specific format, let others know, right? Are people coming from a certain campaign and searching for something oddly specific? You want to let others know. Share those insights, because you never know what your efforts are doing and what you're learning from that around certain behaviors or audience behaviors can benefit another team or another part of the organization who's also ultimately engaging and interacting with your user base. That's how you get into this kind of agile rhythm of learning, and that notion of digital evolution is, yes, we are talking about two very specific ways to enhance the user experience through personalization and tailored search. But ultimately, someone who's executing email campaigns can benefit from those learnings and what you're seeing as well. And so, of course, it's 2024, so we can't not mention AI at least a few more times in this webinar. I know Sean touched on it a little bit. When it comes to AI, there's a number of different ways that AI can help to both improve both search and personalization. I think, the first thing being, and Sean touched on this, is that more and more search tools, like a Sitecore search, for example, have integrated AI into the tooling, right? We're seeing that not just across search engines, but across marketing technology, across the board with AI integration. But using search and letting AI learn about your audience's common search behaviors ultimately helps to bridge this gap between your consumer's vocabulary and your brand's vocabulary, so that you can continue to serve up the most relevant content. So using AI as that learning mechanism, also helping to deliver a lot of those relevant search results and kind of feed this learning loop that we have. In addition to built-in AI, you can take advantage of learnings from search behaviors and what people are acting on in search, and use those insights to then feed back into the prompts that you're using. So if you're using a generative AI tool like ChatGPT for when you're creating content, look at the data that the search tool is collecting on how people are searching on the site. Are they short searches, long searches? What are the top words that people are using? Again, when you're bridging the gap between your brand vocabulary and your consumers, you can then refine your use of generative AI to be more reflective of how your audience is asking or searching for different types of information. And then lastly, AI serves as a really great tool to optimize meta information for content by using generative AI and other AI tools to analyze data related to search and user behaviors. Continuous meta optimization leads to higher search satisfaction and can ultimately help power more automated personalization across the site as well. And so, those are a few different ways that AI can assist here. Obviously, we can kind of spend more time on that, but wanted to make sure that we touched on that in addition to kind of some of the 4 key best practices that we hit on. And so, kind of our last section here is really about how to tell when search is adding value, right? So we asked at the beginning if search was a replacement for personalization, and hopefully, throughout this webinar, we've demonstrated that these two tactics can really work hand in hand to improve the overall digital customer experience. So again, the question then becomes, how do you know when search is adding value to personalization and ultimately kind of your overall digital marketing efforts? The first way to tell if search is adding value is you have to make sure that you're data driven, right? You need to have a measurement plan. You want to know what metrics you're measuring, but in order to tell if something's adding value, you want to put your data-driven hat on and make sure you're looking for insights. Again, as I mentioned, I think a lot of people will look at personalization more often and tweak that, but don't forget about search, right? We need to be data-driven when we're looking holistically at these tactics and the impact that they can have and what we're getting from them. Then I think the next way to tell if search is adding value to personalization is by really gauging where you are in your personalization maturity journey, right? There's a number of different maturity models out there. I wasn't going to replicate that, but we talked about the levels of personalization earlier on in the webinar. And ideally, by incorporating search tactics into your personalization strategies, you're progressing the type of personalization that you're delivering and you're maturing those efforts. And you're also able to increase your ability or your team's ability to meet customer needs through your content and through your user experience. So if we're going this way, we are adding value to our search and personalization efforts. Next, the next way to make sure that you are developing or that you're adding value is if you have a measurement plan, whether you need to develop one or you have one in place. To ensure that search is adding value, you want to make it clear what overarching business goals your efforts are supporting, right? I've worked with a number of different organizations who wanted to start personalizing, whether on the site or through search, and I would ask them why, and they would say, well, our competitors are doing it, which is a totally fine kind of jumpstart point. But ultimately, you want to be serving certain business objectives and also meeting the needs of your audience, right? So crafting a measurement strategy and having, clearly defined overarching business goals that you're supporting is so important. That will also help to ensure that you have the appropriate tagging implementation involved and that you have the right tracking. And that's such an important step because that's going to help to inform future personalization and search strategies and how we evolve what we've done. So by aligning on measurable business goals, we can point to specific metrics that demonstrate success and where efforts are adding value across the board. And then lastly, from this perspective, that search is adding value when you're learning, right? Specifically, you're able to move from knowing that something needs to change to knowing what needs to change. With search and personalization working in tandem, you can inform your personalization strategy by using those search insights on what content people are seeking out. Bubble that up at strategic points in their journey outside of search. You can also identify potential areas of improvement in navigation or with calls to action, for example. If you have something that's clearly in the navigation to you, but is still something that folks are commonly searching for, maybe it's time to reevaluate how that's presented. Maybe give it a little bit more love, put it in a spotlight. Additionally, search is adding value when you can start to identify where you have content gaps and you know what content to create to aid users in their journey. And then also, if you can share your learnings from your personalization and search efforts to inform other teams like we talked about, I would say that search and personalization efforts are working pretty nicely together at that point. And so I know that that's a lot of content and it may be difficult to summarize this very quickly, but we will give it a shot. So in terms of kind of the 4 key takeaways, I'll tag you in, Sean, to kind of take us through our first one here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jill. I think we know from the content we've presented today that search and personalization, they're better together. Search is not a replacement for personalization, but it's a way to accelerate personalization efforts to meet customer expectations. And we're in the age of AI. Everyone wants to go faster, and we're finding the tools and the capabilities to allow us to do that. Those 2 things knitted together, deployed in the right way, are absolutely going to help you do that. The second one is know, define, configure, learn. Really nice 4-step framework. Strong strategies are rooted in knowing your audience and their needs. I'm a product marketer. Jill, before she became SVP at Velir, was a product marketer by trade. She knows her audience really, really well. You need to define those strategies that allow your site to be a proactive guide in the user journey. And proactive is the operative term there. I'll hand it back to you, Jill, for number 3.
You got it. Yeah, I think, we talked about it, but you can't improve what you can't measure, right? So making sure that you have defined metrics as to what you're supporting, what business objectives both search and personalization are helping with is really important. That's going to allow you to demonstrate, if you're doing a proof of concept, it'll allow you to demonstrate the value of that, allow you to get more stakeholder investment, executive investment in these efforts. Again, as we're trying to do more with less, we kind of need to feed these machines, but ultimately we need to prove that they're adding value. So making sure that you have some sort of measurement plan and metrics in place will allow you to do that. And then lastly, as I mentioned, when you know what changes to make, you're doing it right. You really want to go from this notion of something needs to change to I know what needs to change, right? Because we're getting those insights. Again, we're able to see search behaviors and what people are looking for, and maybe they're not finding an answer. Now we know what content gaps we need to fill. If people are falling off at key pages within the user experience, right? That's an opportunity for us to personalize and bring up more content that can keep them engaged. It's informing us on what changes we need to make, and we're able to kind of feed that machine. And so that kind of takes us through our recap. In terms of kind of what now, right? What do we do with all of this? Of course, we'll have time for questions if there are any, and we'll tag Brenda in here in a minute for that. But one of the things that I've found really successful is to do just a digital marketing evaluation, right? I think a lot of times when we're in the weeds with our own efforts, we might potentially be overlooking some quick win opportunities. And so one of the things that, Velir is happy to provide, and, you can link this QR code or scan it, I should say. But, we're able to work with you, in a short engagement to take a look and analyze your audiences, audit your current marketing efforts, and provide kind of a vision and roadmap that will help define those strategies, specifically around search and personalization, how you can achieve those quick wins. If you have the functionality today with any of your marketing technology, we can help you jumpstart that and figure out what's the way to lower that barrier to entry, and really drive towards specific outcomes. So if you're interested, I think these slides will be shared. You can scan that QR code, or feel free to reach out to myself on LinkedIn. I know Sean loves a good LinkedIn connection as well. So I think that's all the content that we have. So hopefully there were some good nuggets in there. I appreciate you guys joining on a Tuesday. And so I think maybe Brenda, I'll pass it back to you to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you so much, Jill and Sean, for such a great presentation. I attribute the fact that there's no Q&A to the fact that your presentation was so clear and the key takeaways were very, very succinct there. So with that, I want to again, Jill, Sean, thank you so much for being here today. And of course, a big shout out to Velir for sponsoring our webinar and making it possible for our audience to be here and learn from you today. And then last but not least, to our audience members, thanks for your attention today and for engaging in the chat with us. Today's webinar was recorded, so in the spirit of sharing is caring, you will get that recording link in an email within the next 24 hours. So again, you can share that with your team and then even just jump back in and take additional notes. So in the meantime, thank you all once more, and we will see you on the next one. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.